we can take a different bucket, and hopefully we can sort of go through the buckets that way and
Sure.
and work that way. Okay? So I've asked Dan if he would present his proposal, and then we can just open it up for discussion. And you have the old policy in front of you, and we can kind of read it and look at it and see how it works or doesn't work with the old policy.
Okay, so I guess the basic idea is that every house has a designated school, and so there's zones. Every school has some attendance zone which will have to be drawn on the map, and every address is in the zone for one school and no more than one school. And other than that, it's basically similar to what we have now. So you can still choose a school outside your zone, and there's still citywide schools, and there's still 3 sectors. The city's still divided into 3 sectors. And so go through it. So I think I want to encourage people to choose their neighborhood school. So part of that is how it's presented to parents. So imagine that you have a kid who turns 4.5, and you get a letter that says, welcome to RCSD. Your neighborhood school is School X. Your principal is Mr. John Gonzalez, who will be giving a tour of School X on January 17th, 2017 at 1 p.m. Last year, among families who live in the attendance zone for School X and who chose School X as their top choice, 100% or whatever number were placed in the school. Is School X your top choice? Yes or no? And a normal human being will mark yes and probably not read the rest of the letter. But if you have too much time on your hands, if you answered no above, or if we cannot place you in School X because it is full, we will assign you to your highest ranked school possible from the list below. Please rank your top 4 choices, choosing from other neighborhood schools in your sector and citywide schools. And then you list your choices. Okay, and so then we have...
Can I pause you for just a second? Because this is a long proposal and there's a lot of content. Maybe we can sort of discuss what you've talked about so far and see what do you think?
Can I go through it first? Because I think it kind of ties together. So
Okay.
I think...
Maybe just get through the lottery part.
Okay, so the lottery. So siblings are placed first with priority above all other students. 60% of spaces in each school are reserved for students from the attendance zone. So this is something that we have in the board policy currently. If more than this number of students from the zone for that school list the school, there's a lottery to award these places. If you don't get a place in your neighborhood school in this step, you roll over to the next step with your neighborhood school considered as your first choice. Okay, and then step 3 is the lottery for the remaining places. And so people who list the school as their first choice get chosen, and then if there's still room, people who listed the school as their second choice, and so on. And one thing that's different from now is it's one lottery for citywide schools and neighborhood schools at the same time. So you rank your choices, including all of them, and then the same process applies to all of them, to both neighborhood schools and citywide schools here. The difference between a citywide school is that a citywide school, you can list it no matter which of the 3 sectors of the city you live in, and there's no preference based on where you live. There's no attendance zone. Okay, and then number 4, this is for all grades, so the same procedure applies to people who transfer, and so if you are transferring, you do get preference at your neighborhood school. Okay, so...
And if you move out of the neighborhood, are you then still in your same old school?
you
or-
can stay.
Okay.
Okay, so pros and cons. Do you want? Why don't I just go through this?
Yeah, why don't you?
Okay. Okay, so pros. Connection to the neighborhood is strengthened because every neighborhood has a designated school, and more parents will choose their neighborhood school if it's presented as the default. There's less uncertainty for parents because every address has priority at some school. So This is for people who are not within a half mile of any school today. And you can find out what your neighborhood school is when you shop for a house. Students from low-income neighborhoods continue to have access to School 23, 46, etc. The 60% rule guarantees that this access will continue in the future regardless of trends in enrollments, neighborhood dynamics, etc. that we may not be able to predict today. But today, no school is close to that 60% threshold, but who knows what might happen in the future. We still have Spanish immersion, Montessori, etc. in citywide schools. This is about the citywide and neighborhood lottery happening at the same time. I just think that's less confusing. So currently, a lot of parents ask, well, what if my first choice is my neighborhood school, but my second choice is a citywide school? And it's confusing how the lotteries interact. Like, is it citywide first and then neighborhood, or vice versa? And rather than explaining that to people, I think it's easier to just have one lottery where everything is the same and you just mark your choices and you just get your top choice that there's space for. Rollover from neighborhood lottery to general lottery means that if every student in the entire district chooses the neighborhood school, every student can go to their neighborhood school. So basically what I mean here is that there's a 60% thing, but that's not an upper limit on how many students can go to that school from the neighborhood. So if everybody from the neighborhood wants to go to the school and nobody from other neighborhoods wants to go, hypothetically, it could be 100%. Students moving into the district or within the district have priority at the new neighborhood school. So I think this is not happening today. And the procedure is easy to understand and can be described precisely in one page in the placement booklet. I listed this as the last pro, but this is actually my biggest beef with the policy today. Nobody understands what it is, and nobody knows how to fill out the form because they don't know how the lottery works. And if you call the placement office 5 times, you get 5 different answers. It drives people nuts.
I had a question, if it's okay. I want to know, what do you do for the students, because I have 2 situations. What do you do for the students with the birthdays? My daughter, we lived on Warwick and on Arnett Boulevard. My daughter had to choose between 16 and 29. No, they told her she was going to go to 16. And my mom was upset. I had to go talk to somebody at the school district. My name's Michelle Clark, by the way.
Nice to meet you.
And I had to go talk to the school district. My daughter's birthday wasn't until November 29th. So she was going to miss part of the school year, which is not her fault. The school district states that they can't come to school till they're 5 years old. So I had to get this special test for her where she had to do the 1 to 20. If it wouldn't have been for Sesame Street books to keep my daughter from going crazy or whatever, I would have been in a lot of trouble. And I don't think that's fair with the birthdays. Then I got a grandson that's going to do the same thing, but he's born December 11th. So with him, I have no choice. But is there any with your thing?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know?
This doesn't
So we can
address
put
that.
we can put that in a list to kind of deal with kids whose birthdays fall in funny parts of the year if there's a need for
No, I only
writing
want to
policy
address
around
that because
yeah.
I don't want nobody to go through what I went through. Because
Sure.
my mother was going to say something. If I didn't go and act quickly, it would have been real detrimental. I had to really work like fast.
And what is that
I've
period?
never heard that. I mean, I understand the same problem. I've got 3 kids in the district, and Michael, his birthday's in October. And so December 1st, you're right, is that hard cutoff. And I've never heard that. And I'm not, I think it should be something that should be clear in whatever
They said
policy. That if your birthday's between, I think it's September 1st and December 1st, it's the parent's choice. But it sounds like they didn't give you any
They
choice.
told
said you
my
had to
daughter,
wait.
they said that because she was not coming to school till December, she was only going to she missed 3 months.
But they wouldn't let you bring her in September, is what you're saying?
They told me she had to
And so
wait
I
till
never
she
heard
was
that.
5.
Yeah.
So that goes back to Dan's
Really?
point, which is that, you call
Placement office.
placement and they tell you different things, and we need to make it clear in the policy. So we'll make sure we address that in the policy
All right.
suggestions.
I was trying not to interrupt, but I thought that was important.
It's if you actually, this
It
is
is.
the part. What we want to do is take Dan's proposal and kind of look through it and question it and see if we want to make tweaks to it, and also compare it to the policy, the old policy as written. So that's what I want mostly today's meeting to be all focused on.
Yeah.
So Did you get through it?
Well, let me do the negatives.
Yeah, okay, good.
So some students will not attend their neighborhood schools, so that's the number one. Some students who are currently within half a mile of a school will no longer be in the attendance zone for that school, so there's no more half mile. Because of the uneven geographic distribution of schools, the attendance zones will be oddly shaped, so somebody will have to draw these on the map. And some parents will complain that they're closer to school X, but they're in the zone for school Y.
Mm-hmm.
In order to have certain or near certain placement in your neighborhood school, attendance boundaries will need to be adjusted over time as population shifts. So somebody has to do that. And then finally, 60% rule may prevent some students from attending their neighborhood school. This will only happen if many more students choose their neighborhood school than is currently the case at any school. And if at the same time the school is in high demand from students in other attendance zones. So I don't know if this will ever happen, but it could happen. And that's it.
Okay. So first of all, let's make sure, do we have any extra copies of Dan's proposal floating around?
There's one. You can take this. I brought an extra map.
An extra
Extra.
map, yes,
There's
we
an
have
extra
some
one.
right there. And how about extra, probably don't have anything, do you?
Version.
Dan's proposal. And any extra minutes from last time? And any extra policies around the table?
Other minutes.
Other minutes, okay. Okay,
There's more minutes.
okay.
So are we gonna just ask Dan questions about situations?
Yeah, I'd like
Okay.
So
whole
maybe
meetings
we'll
focused
go
on each of
around
the
the
buckets,
room,
so
or
that might be
something
nice.
like
So, yeah, let's just go around the room.
There's two things that sort of immediately jump out. The one is something that we've chosen to speak around for and sort of table and move along, which is sibling placement and auto placement, which makes sense at your neighborhood school and possibly even just the zone schools, but may or may not make sense at citywide schools, and where that fits into the process for that auto sibling placement. Is that after city or after neighborhood school selection, but before the lottery? Is that where does that actually fit into the process? The other one would be the general fill up of citywide schools, and what happens if all of the schools that you've selected you don't get on that lottery level. So I by allowing citywide schools to be selected in the same lottery, I pick Montessori, 58. I picked the four most in high demand schools as my lottery selection, and for luck of the draw, I don't get any of those four because they all fill on first round sort of a thing. What's the fallout pattern from that? Those are the only two things that stick out that would still need to get smoothed over.
Yeah,
That just
comment.
like to in concert with that, and I Dan, I like the thoroughness and the you did fill in a pretty good sequential step of what's going to happen, and I think that question really, what happens when families choose to participate in a lottery, and it's always going to be the same top five in some regards. They're going to be the most anticipated or most selected. So that I'm not sure how that's currently being sorted right now. But to the citywide schools, I think in the spirit of a citywide, and this is kind of a radical idea, what if we said, and I think this could be clearly stated, every neighborhood would be given 3 spots. So 58 school truly draws from the city. And so it's not that the neighborhoods where the greatest percentage of families elect 58, it's that my neighborhood is the Merchants Culver neighborhood, and my neighborhood gets 2 spots, and the Jefferson Road gets the same number of spots. So you can participate in that lottery in that neighborhood, and if you're one of 3 families to do it, that neighborhood's guaranteed 3 spots. I think the same thing could be applied to Soda, where we truly make these citywides. Every neighborhood gets a shot, but no neighborhood, because of the number of entries, is over-enrolled. And then you would go back and do the neighborhood school. Like, I would almost do that first in the process.
Oh, so you're suggesting separating out the citywides from...
Like doing a lottery, like, because and call it a lottery, it's not a choice. You're not choosing a school, you're choosing to participate in a lottery. And every neighborhood can, everybody can participate, but every neighborhood gets X slots. And then once that lottery's done, those citywide schools are enrolled. They are populated. Mm-hmm. And then I think you can go to this neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. My only thing is, I'm sorry, I was going to step in, but siblings still should have preference for that citywide lottery because you don't want to be sending your siblings to a zone school and your other children are going to a citywide.
And I agree that there's a definite benefit to having a family in a given school, but at the same time, if you take a situation along the lines of some of our citywide schools that are in highest demand, where we were hearing about that 80% right now of enrollment is placed through sibling existence, and especially since we do sibling existence both age directions. So if I'm a household with 3 children, and I don't get in on my oldest child, and then 2 years later I do get in on my second oldest child. Well, now all 3 of my students go to that particular citywide school because I can use the sibling placement to sort of backfill in at a harder age.
That's the way it's working now?
Yes, that's the way it's working now.
If I could just push
If there's
back
an
a little, like like if we want, I think one of the priorities of the district is increased parent engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So the amount of schools your children are split up would decrease parent engagement in those schools. So for me, I would, although it might be like heavy with sibling preference, I think separating families would be worse than the sibling preference, because parents could not actively be engaged in those schools. And I do parent engagement in 8 of the schools through the Greater Rochester Health Foundation. And I talk to parents, and that's a major issue, that they have children split all across the city, which doesn't allow for them to participate in PTO, PTA, family fun nights, parent night, school. So I think that would be a real problem, especially since so many families in the city also they rely on public transportation as well, which would make it almost impossible to be actively engaged in 2 or 3 different schools.
But we ask, so my daughter's a 7th grader at East, and I've got kids at 52.
Okay.
So I think the number of schools, again, I think we need to look at it in that, well, in my perfect world, we ask every family to send their kid to a neighborhood school, and we use every resource that we can to provide the programming that would satisfy those parents in those buildings. But if we're talking about an 80% placement at these highly coveted schools, how many families are we saying no to?
Just 2.
Don't we have an urban suburban program anymore?
We do.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because what I'm saying, well, the thing I'm looking at of it is, and don't think that I'm being ghetto or whatever, I feel that the siblings should be at the school, but a lot of kids, we're not just talking about siblings, we're talking about cousins and whatever. And I'm not saying that some of these kids are bad, but there's so much family there with the fighting and the craziness sometimes. Some families will have 10 children in one family. I'm not talking about brothers and sisters, I'm talking about cousins and all of that and whatever. And sometimes letting the kids go to another one will keep all that foolishness out of the schools, because kids are not like they were when we were going to school. But I understand what he's saying, though. But what I'm saying is, y'all closing a lot of schools that I didn't even know were closed that kids could get to in 10 minutes that are going to take them more time. So they should have them where they can go to the suburban schools, since we're losing a lot of our schools. We need 20 schools on certain sides of town, especially my west side, because they took away certain schools on the 36 and the 22 and the 6. I mean, all those schools were needed. If my nieces and nephews didn't have that school, they would be in trouble.
It's interesting to have the two perspectives. How about others? Let's keep kind of debating this in the group.
Well, I think the first priority on Dan's list was siblings are placed first.
I think splitting up siblings is horrible. I would never want that to happen to my kids. And the fact that families with 3 or more kids end up getting a higher chance is, I think that's okay. That's a reasonable trade-off to make.
I think it's clear there's pros and cons, and we just have to sort of pick the greatest good, even though it's all not perfect, right?
I could do the family thing, especially if we segregated it by zone, by neighborhood, not even by zone. I think we can't give a citywide lottery has to draw representatively from the city.
And
then I guess the sibling preference wouldn't matter as much, because you're still filling equally from each neighborhood of the city.
The other benefit to that is, originally when World of Inquiry was started, they drew from, it was very specific. It was middle city, inner city, and outer city, and that's how they created their population after the race riots in the 60s. And I think that you're still able to, and I'm just talking citywides right now, but you're still able to maintain a school culture where you have neighborhoods, pockets of people attending. So like what you're saying, if you have each neighborhood or each zone has a certain amount of spaces, you still can carry that neighborhood feel to a citywide school, which benefits the school, as a whole, because you're still having families that can help each other out from each neighborhood attending the school. So even though it's not a neighborhood school, you still have people that you're at the school with from your neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So I think that is really beneficial to keep that and to maintain that. My worry with that is that the way that placement has performed in the past is that nobody's paying attention to that. So whose responsibility is that going to be to draw certain spots from each? You know what I mean? Like in the past, placement has. We know that they don't even pay attention to the zones, right? That people are in the northeast, northwest, south zone. So would it be the school's responsibility to run the lottery? And they know where neighborhoods are coming from. So that's just a.
What if that? So I think that's the other. So much of it to me is every step of this policy has to be understandable and consistent.
Right.
And if we said, the district, register your child at your neighborhood school, and you go to that school. And when you go to the neighborhood school, you say, there will be a lottery for citywides only. These are the 3 of them that we have. Every neighborhood gets a certain number of spots. Mm-hmm. The lottery will take place on February, whatever. Could be April 3rd. I don't know what day it needs to be. If you would like to participate in this lottery, check yes. And then after that lottery, okay, I don't know what happens next. And then we continue our discussion. But it doesn't do the. We do harm to neighborhood schools when we do a lottery afterwards, because you don't know how many kids are going to end up in a particular neighborhood school.
That's a good question. I'm still kind of fuzzy on why we even need the lottery, over the neighborhood schools. what is the reason? You know, I'm kind of new, so why do we even need?
I like neighborhoods myself, sir. So you and I are like on the same page.
No, I think that having some amount of choice outside of just the citywide schools is actually an important thing.
Can you say more?
Just from my experiences, I've got a second grader right now. When we were looking at schools, the school that would be my neighborhood school, I was really unimpressed with the principal and the programs that were going on at the school. There were 2 schools that I was extremely ecstatic about, however, that were still within my zone, that I would have happily had my child attend and go to. And so having that choice and the ability to, you know, to the point of, you know, a community certified school, if you from that particular just are like, no, this particular just doesn't jive with me, the ability to sort of skip past and go to the next one, you know, on some level is an important step. But at the same time, you know, encouraging to stay as close as, you know, as possible is also a wonderful goal.
I think in an ideal world, if every school were, if we had community accreditation, you know, as you've described it, then, you know, more schools would be satisfying and wonderful and you wouldn't need the choices. So I see this choice in the lottery as kind of a stopgap measure. It's a reality situation right now, but ideally, you know, if we could work towards the accreditation, then we might be there'd be less and less need for the lottery.
I'm not sure if your proposal takes into account that many families also move a lot, and so like how you regulate families that are in the zone, but then 6 months later they aren't in the zone, because there's a lot of transition of families moving from house to house to house. So like, how does the policy take an effect of that?
Now, I wish Willow were here because she knows exactly the answer to that, but I know that probably exceptions are made for families that move, but I'm not positive about that. Does somebody know otherwise?
No, but that to me is like one of the top 2 issues that we need to think about collaborating with the city of Rochester. And I'm a big believer that we want not great schools for all, we want great neighborhoods for all. This notion that if we send a student to another school but they still can't play it out in the neighborhood on the weekends or the summer is not going to solve that kid's life. If a school, and we work with the city of Rochester, can somehow help families that are they know they have to move, and somehow subsidize or somehow help transition that move within the neighborhood, reasonably close to the school still. Maybe you're across the street now, so now you're in a different school's neighborhood, but close enough that you can still manage it.
Dan, you mentioned you've got talk about that.
And if families knew that was at every school, we're not. Are you school 17?
Yeah. So let me just say briefly. So when I was a rookie principal in the early '90s, I would be able to pick up the phone and get busing for a family that wanted to stay in the school. They had to move. But then when the budgets got even tighter, they really cut that off for principals. So I called Eric Van Duzen of the Housing Council. He's not there now. He's with Neighborhood Works, I think, now. But Eric Van Duzen and I worked really closely together. And Eric knew so many of the landlords than I did. And so when a parent came to me and said, listen, many of them in tears, I don't want to leave the school, but we have to move, the pipes burst or whatever. And I would call Eric right away, right in front of the parent, and we'd set up, he'd send someone else to help find that person an apartment within my school zone. So what you say is absolutely true. That's a powerful way we can collaborate with the city. Now I know that they're starting to do a lead registry, landlords that are making their homes lead safe. So we can combine that, and that's another motivation for landlords and for the schools to really integrate with their communities in a multifaceted way.
What department did Eric work in again?
He was with, I just said it.
He's NeighborWorks now.
He's with NeighborWorks now,
Housing
but he was
Council.
with
The city.
Housing Council?
Yes,
Housing Council.
thank you.
And so maybe we could look into what's currently available and what might be
He
revisited.
may have suggestions, but the collaboration with the city, I think, is powerful.
Okay.
Could we have like like we make up a flyer for the parents or whatever about the schools, and then we have the teacher of that class and the principal come to each home, like each teacher, each class, if it's not crazy, to come to each home, sit down and talk to the parents on a day they can, or if not the parents, whoever's taking care of that child. And then that way the parents can know what type of programs is in the school and what their children are getting to, if it's music, if it's art, different things like that in the after school program. Because a lot of the recreation centers, if the child lives with a school, like 12 School has a recreation center, it helps them do better when they're in the school with the recreation center, because the parents work, whatever, they can know what their kids are getting into and whatever. Then to say, I picked this school, but my child's not getting this, my child's not getting that, blah, blah, because the schools can only do so much. It's up to us parents and grandparents to do the rest, the school.
Right, so those are all great suggestions. They're mostly in I'd say the recruitment bucket, right? Where you're getting out to the families and saying, how can we bring in the families? How can we get the information out to the families?
Which actually is not a bad idea, because there are some districts across the country where there is choice, school choice, principals do go out and
that's what they did back
they
when
knock
we were
on
in
doors
school.
and they say, I want your child to come to my school. So that's not far-fetched.
So folks in the recruitment bucket, make sure you got those ideas. So we can discuss them when we talk
Rec centers connected
about
to
that
schools here.
next time.
Among other things.
When Rochester City School District was City School District, it was so simple. It's when I had kids that it got different. When I went to school, there was no...
Well, when my husband and I moved here, we bought our house in the neighborhood at the school that we wanted, and we didn't have to deal with choice or lottery or any of that. It seems so simple, and it seems so complicated right now. But,
It seems like some of the zones for the schools would be a challenge to define them as unique. So I think your first statement was every street will have a school. And if I look at this one corner, it looks like it's 29, 19, 2, and 4. I mean, they're all overlapping.
Yeah, so the zones, and there are also neighborhoods that are very far from any school, so there's going to have to be arms that reach out into that center where there's nothing.
Right.
But if we want neighborhood schools,
Yeah, we
I
have
don't
to do
see
it
any way
somehow.
around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you
Mr.
could,
Hallmark, what are the odds of building
Building
two elementary schools with the school modernization funds in the next 5 years?
probably very little.
That's good to know.
Since they sold some buildings recently.
Well, I was going to say, I know that this is, we're kind of
Because they've already got
going
it
in
planned out.
a reverse order to some extent. Like I know that
0 is the
Brizard came and
answer.
did
Yeah.
0. That's good. That's good to know.
They've got it already planned out to 2021,
Yeah.
I think,
Okay.
at this point. So,
Can I get a little more clarification? Because
Sure.
so with this lottery system, we really need. It just comes down to the real nuts and bolts of it. Just comes down to a huge population of the city just want to go to a few schools, and that's just not logistically possible for that to happen. So we have to go to this really complex system to spread out the students so that we can be socially, economically diverse, racially diverse, and all of that kind of a thing.
well, and I think the original idea when we moved from you just go to the school in your neighborhood was some neighborhoods are really poor, some are really wealthy, and that's not fair to the kids in the poor schools, so we should give them access to schools all around. And yet that was the very thing that drove neighborhoods to not be neighborhoods anymore, right? So maybe we should be reversing that and focusing on how do you build the neighborhoods and how do you keep people in the neighborhoods and how do you build community and make it stronger so kids don't feel like they have to leave or families feel like they need to leave. So it was a good idea, but it created new problems.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I see.
Yeah.
I feel like if you went to East Rochester and you told every citizen in East Rochester, your school is terrible. If you compare your school's results to Pittsford's, you should be able to send your kid to Pittsford. And then you say, well, we're gonna have a school of choice, and families from Pittsford can send their kids to East Rochester if you want, or you can stay at Pittsford. I don't think many people from East Rochester they might be insulted that we were telling them that their school district was so much worse than Pittsford's. But statistically, Pittsford's is much better. It's the best in the state by test results. So I think, similarly, the spirit was right, that we wanted to take a population and tell them there's a better choice here, like telling the residents of East Rochester. Whereas I think if we look at neighborhoods as
with assets.
In 10 years from now, we want every neighborhood property value to be higher than it currently is.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to build residents who want to live there for decades. I like neighborhood schools.
What I see the problem is, and I'm not trying to be funny, is the 3 things that they left out that we had. There's no summer camp anymore. There's no, if you know you're going to go back to that teacher, they used to give you a packet, no matter what grade you were in, even in high school, where you took it during the summertime, and when you came back to school, it had to be ready so that way you were still learning. And now with all these computers and stuff, they should still have that, because now they can get it done faster. And like I said, we might not have the summer camp, but as parents and grandparents, we might have to do some type of camping or something with the children since they're not having no camps. When we had summer camp, the packets and whatever, we were different children. We were learning more. We knew what camp was. We knew what leadership was, friendship, and all of that. I mean, it was rough in camp.
The camps were in the schools, or when you're saying the camps?
Like, they would have camps. They would have, like Katy Street was near 2 school. They always had day camp. My son even
at the school.
Well, they had it either at the school or the neighborhood center that was near the school.
Yep.
And like I said, the neighborhood centers and the schools work together. And they don't do it like they do, because my son used to work at Katy Street when he had when he had a job. We called it CETA when we went, in JTPA they called it good grades, jobs for good grades. But I think that needs to be done because it helps the children.
Right. So once again, that's I would put that in the recruitment bucket, and like how we need to work with our rec centers more and help families find schools and be drawn in the summer.
Commissioner Homework. Where I know the interim superintendent is requesting busing for all students, correct?
Yes.
Where is that at right now?
It's stalled out right now, but we're working on it. And actually, the last thing I heard was that we were trying to get transportation for some pilot program, because the state is resistant to providing more money. And so we said, well, how about if we hit this 5 schools that are in the RMAPI area? And that's what we were working on. I think it's different. So, but we're working on it, but I think it's not there yet. So.
Because there's a large amount of parents I talk to that choose a further school just for transportation, because they can't walk the mile with
it's a huge problem.
Smaller children.
Right.
And sidewalks aren't plowed. Some neighborhoods aren't as safe as others, so they purposely choose a school they know their child will get busted.
That's right.
Is that something that we could, certainly, especially ones on the the Midwest, near Mountain League, I mean, that's heavy traffic. I'd be more, very, very concerned about some of the neighborhood schools that have higher traffic areas. 52 school in my neighborhood, and they have a crossing guard at the corner of Merchants in Wisconsin. It's not a huge. Yeah, so I think there's some schools that are more conducive to not needing busing, and just from a public health standpoint, we make light of. No, we don't make light of. Physical well-being is important.
Walking to school.
And walking to school, I agree that there are families that choose busing a lot of times, not just because it might be because the school start time is better for that family, as well as they don't then have to worry about them walking. But it's that momentum. If we could get the culture established that you could walk to your neighborhood school with your neighbor across the street who's maybe 2 or 3 years older,
Right, and
Well, I've done a lot of work on that with walking school bus and walkability through my job. So, and I've done a lot of walkability surveys of number 2 school 10, 19, and Reynolds Street, for example, seems like it'd be fine to walk, but cars go down Reynolds Street at 45 miles an hour. So after talking to parents, they choose schools further away for safety, for transportation.
So again,
and there's a
yeah.
large percentage of families that do not have transportation, that they rely on getting rides or catching RTS.
Yeah.
And so we
Oh, it's
can't
huge.
not take that into account.
So again, I think that's a collaboration piece with the city to look at the traffic also. So
Which
so-
we're actually working
Yeah.
right now. There's the city we're working to get them to redo Reynolds and Magnolia. And
That's great.
so there's work to be done, but those are serious issues.
Okay, great. So, and that would be like the transportation. So, you're new to this group. So we have three buckets, as we call them. There's a placement group, which we're mostly discussing tonight, recruitment, and then there's the third group is kind of neighborhood schools / transportation. And so I'd like to see if we can keep the focus. These are all great ideas, but I want to mostly focus on the placement ideas that were proposed here that we can debate pro and con, and then in the next meetings we'll keep coming because we want to go in depth into each of the bucket ideas.
Is there also a bucket for vacant properties? Because parents also have told me that's a major issue for letting their kids walk to neighborhood schools, is because there's so many boarded up homes and
Okay, that
safety.
sounds like
So I'm not
something
sure
in
if
the
that's something-
neighborhood and the neighborhood bucket. So we'll make sure that goes in there.
So with the policy, I wanted to say that there is currently on the district website a directory of streets and your neighborhood school. I don't know if people know that, but there actually is. There is a directory. I think it was from probably when this policy was started in 2002. You can look it up, and if you put your street and your address in, you can look it up. It's not, you don't type it in, it's listed. And then it tells you what your
So you'll say
home
zone,
school is.
South zone.
So if I type in
Downstairs
Meg
school.
Street, it will say my home school is school 12.
I think that goes to real estate. Even 50 years ago,
Yeah,
you bought
I mean,
a house,
it's
it told
probably
you which
totally
school you
outdated.
were.
I don't think placement follows it, but I just want to say that is on the district website. It does say there is a directory of what street you live on and what school you are
What
assigned
school?
as your home school. So
So
that
It's
is
not as
out
long as what
there.
school. It's your neighborhood. It
Your
just gives
neighborhood
you one
school,
school.
sorry. Yes. Your one school that you are.
So that's on the website.
It is.
And that should be connected more with the recruitment.
Right, or something
work,
similar, but
right.
again, and I'm sorry so many times I said we have some of this stuff in place, but no one's following it. So
Right.
I also, Dan, with your policy, I wanted to ask if you go through and say, yes, I want to go to my neighborhood school, but there is not enough room at the school, then what happens? If you decided not to list anything, what was the next step?
Well, I don't know what happens if you don't list anything, but.
So do you have to, is what I was asking. I was just trying to picture, like, if people were writing it
Yes.
down. So you're expected to say yes or no, and then still fill out those.
Basically.
Okay.
Could there
Okay.
be a default, like in your neighborhood, like
Which-
without having to fill out?
Well, I think
any of
that
this
the-
stuff,
I mean,
like
I think
the
that-
easy peasy way.
Well, right, that's what I was wondering.
I think that the default is that you go to your neighborhood school, and I think that it is unlikely that they will fill up. But if they do fill up, I don't really
Then
know
the
what to do other than have.
Placement takes the
I
time
mean,
to
that
make a
grade,
call.
that
and-
grade may fill up, right?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
So there could be a constraint on the school grade, but not on the school.
Sure.
right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask that. And then also, are there zones in this policy? Is there a northeast, northwest, and south zone?
Yes.
So you're still expected to choose within the
Yes.
zone, but also citywide you
Yes.
can choose. And you're
Yes.
using those all the same. Okay. And then another clarification that I'm in the current policy that I have never been able to get a straight answer from is authority and responsibility. For number 4, it says assigning students to zone schools of choice by computerized lottery. The priorities are A, sibling preference, 0.5 proximity preference for 60% of the available seats, and socioeconomic fairness guidelines determined by free or reduced lunch ratios at the school level. Can anyone explain what that is?
The free
Yes.
and reduced.
Okay.
So, as you know, it has never been implemented,
Okay.
and I think it's not going to be implemented unless we spell out exactly what that means.
Okay.
And I think that the way to achieve socioeconomic equity is by letting people choose neighborhood schools other than their own neighborhood school. So 23 is my neighborhood school. I love it. It's the highest performing school in the district by a large margin. And a lot of kids from other neighborhoods are trying to get in, and they do get in, and I don't want to tell them, no, you can't go there because you don't live at Park Ave. So that's, to answer your question, why do we have a lottery in the first place? And I didn't put anything in here about organizing the lottery according to free and reduced lunch because we could do that, but I think it would make things more complicated. And I think that without taking that into account, it tends to sort of work out. Like people from every neighborhood have access to schools in other neighborhoods just by following the system.
Well, let's debate that. Yeah.
Let me finish. So and there's one other issue which I thought about, which is that now that everybody gets the lunch, and we started giving the lunch to everybody, I'm not sure we can enforce something based on free and reduced lunch because you don't have to fill out the form for your income anymore. So,
I guess, but one of the questions is to look at why is School 23 performing so high. It's because there's socioeconomic integration at the school. It's not a high concentration of poverty, higher than other schools.
I think that's absolutely right, and this policy is designed to make that continue. I mean, that's my.
So what does this mean then? Does it mean that if you are?
It means so. My proposal is that the board adopts this, and there's no language about socioeconomic status in the policy, but that the neighborhood, the fact that you can choose a school outside your neighborhood and that you can choose a citywide school does give people equal, encourages some kind of diversity and gives people from different neighborhoods some kind of equal access.
I can only make sort of an assumption about that based upon the various charter schools in the area. The various charter schools in the area all have a very explicit breakdown by that in their lottery policies of a first run on the lottery being done by free lunch eligible, a second run being done by reduced lunch eligible, and then anybody who doesn't qualify for one of those being in the third run on the lottery. And because almost every charter school has it almost like word for word almost exactly the same, I'm assuming that they got it somewhere from the district. Not, they didn't come up with a
might be a state requirement,
a 6-paragraph long, almost identical statement on their own. You know what I mean? That it came from either the district or the state or somewhere. It was not random.
That's a good point, that all of them are free and reduced lunch. It's not really distinguishable, so then what does that really mean?
I guess what I was saying with that is that if you look at schools where we have high concentrations of poverty and we're trying to break up poverty across our city, right? I mean, we want to break up concentrated poverty so that we can close achievement gaps. I know you disagree with me on this, but it seems that if there's 60% if we go to neighborhood schools, we make this recommendation to have neighborhood schools, but then there are vacant seats, I would think we would look at then who is applying to those schools, and if we have a majority of low-income families at the school, then preference would go to those high or middle-income families to kind of break that up. And so I'm looking at the next step after the neighborhood school. Like what would make sense there? Or if you have a school, like you're saying, School 23 has worked out, so you have 60% fills up, let's say, with Park Ave middle-income families, then what fills up next is going to be not necessarily 40%, more middle-income families, but then you're saying people from across the zone that fit that, so that we can have some balance at our schools, because yes, we want neighborhood schools, but we also want to break up poverty in our city.
But you can't do that without incorporating the suburbs.
Well, we have but we do have a lot of people who live in the city that send their kids to private schools that are middle income.
Great schools for all will come back with something on this because of the visits to Raleigh.
you know, they've already came out with a final report which has their recommendations.
Okay.
And that's based on the research they've done for the last 3 years. And the Wake County School District in Raleigh, North Carolina was was a primary focus on their research because but they're a countywide system.
Yep.
And they purposely balanced their schools based on economics. So the goal was to not have any school with more than 40% of the students below the poverty level.
Right, so we should use that research as
So
well.
I want to
wait.
I want to respond to what you said. So
That's
that
what I'm saying, Paul.
I think
mean,
that
you get plenty of time.
we could.
Jeez.
So we could incorporate that into the policy. We could say that, once School 23 hits 60%, that low-income kids have priority on the remaining, and that's what they do in Wake County. But I just don't think it would make that much of a difference here. So, number one, School 23 is not close to hitting 60% from the neighborhood, and 90% of the kids from outside the neighborhood are already low income. So I don't think it would make much difference in practice, and it would be more paperwork for you to fill out on the form, and it's kind of intrusive to ask people that question in the first place. And so I just don't really think it's worth it.
Yeah, I was only saying that so that you recognize that there are places that have done that research, and some of the decisions are based on looking at that. Doesn't mean that Monroe County is not going to have a countywide system in the near future because the politics here would never allow that to happen. So, but that's one of the things that they found is when they have schools that are balanced that way, then the results are improved from what they are now. However, the Grad Nation report that just came out, well, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's looking at trying to improve graduation rates across the country. The goal is to get to 90%, and they're surveying every district across public school district across the country. And one of the things they said, I mean, they just did a webinar yesterday. One of the things they said that even though you can use this economic balance as one way to improve school outcomes, what they're saying is there are districts, and I know this for a fact because I've been doing the research myself, there are places that didn't do that but improved the schools so that regardless of what the balance was in terms of the social economics in that school, that the students still succeeded. And so that's what they're, and that's one of the things they were encouraging in this webinar is, let's not get caught up in this balancing the socioeconomics, because even though it would be ideal if perhaps if you could do that, but realistically, is that going to happen? Probably not. But by looking at schools that have been successful in creating quality programs for all of their students, and the outcomes reflect that what we should be doing is looking at those programs, looking at how they did that, and then replicating that in other schools and other districts. So that's one of the things that it was highly recommended. And I didn't print out the report yet. It's about 150 pages. But anyway.
Yeah, one of the things that I think we have to do is look at making sure that as we transition to whatever new system we've got, that there's enough excitement and expectation put into actually changing how the school interacts with the neighborhood. You know, for instance, we'd like to have the school add stability to the neighborhood. If parents really think that it's important for them to be able to interact easily with the school, they'll think twice about moving out of the school's neighborhood. And a lot of times they have choices, and if your kids are going 2 miles away to a school, that gives you a lot more choice than if they're going half a mile to the local school. There are things we can do to improve the interaction within the schools if we add consulting in the school so that parents who need a job have some link to job placement. If they need more training, they can be referred to adult education programs. If they see their local school as a resource for them as well as a good place for their child, it gives them that much more reason to choose the school and to stay with the school, even though there may be, other factors afoot.
Right. So hang on to all those, because I think that goes into this bucket's stuff.
Let me just say that some schools in Rochester, some elementary schools in Rochester, it's obvious regarding the neighborhood. There's other schools that are a little bit more complex. What I really suggest at this point in our work is that we reach out to the city and get them at the table, because like I said last week, they are experts in knowing these neighborhood groups.
Well, that's actually what this map is. This is the city's map of. This is quite literally. I walked into the planning office.
Right, I can see that.
And said, I would like your map of what you consider the current neighborhoods of the city of Rochester.
So the city, if we partnered with them right now, and because we're swimming in the same direction here, the city wants healthy neighborhoods, engaged, vibrant neighborhoods, healthy neighborhoods, and that's what we want. Because if you have a healthy neighborhood, you have a healthy school. So the thing in my mind is that we capture with the neighborhood groups' input, what are the targeted neighborhood schools? Then we can talk about at the same time, concurrently, we can talk about the details that we're talking about now at the table. And these are exciting things that you're saying. But one of the things that I heard, and this is a little bit further down the trail, is that, and John just said it, but Sean referred to, there was I think Sean, is that right? Mm-hmm. There was a principal in his neighborhood that he really wasn't impressed with. Well, that's really important. Mm-hmm. And so the parents and residents need to have a say on that, because if they don't have a say, a legitimate, authentic say that has teeth, formalized, then that principal will be there for 15 years. You should see how the schools behave when the school district is in their schools doing an assessment. I want the schools to have the same feeling when a community task force is in their building doing an assessment regarding the community accredited schools model. That's when we're really going to see the sand fly.
I would like to piggyback off of what Raul has been saying and John was saying. I talked to both of you guys offline about this issue, and I'm still trying to narrow it all down, because it seems like this choice thing is, with the lottery and all that kind of thing, it's just adding confusion. Oh. And basically, all we really want is everybody to go to the best school. There's not enough of them. So last night I downloaded that PowerPoint presentation about the school choice that was on in the city school district, and is looking at, and they kind of went, for me, they kind of went way too far back. They were talking, Brown versus Board of Education, the 60s and all that kind of stuff. And even though those things, history is relevant, it doesn't necessarily jive with what's going on today, right now. And so as I was thinking that through and trying to do the homework that you said, what can we do? And listening to these two guys, it dawned on me, what about going after the parents? Why not recruit the parents and have their kids come along? So like if you had, and we got to give the parents the tools to be able to do this neighborhood kind of thing to raise the neighborhoods. And so the thing that kind of hit me, and I may be all wet, was like the parents. There's a group of 15 parents, whatever, in a school. They have a preceptor, and this preceptor is going to guide them in a way to do things to be able to improve their school. And so then I thought about, what about using systems that are already working? And I started thinking about sports, So like, for instance, you got these 15 students, parents in this school, and their whole goal is just to make the school better. And you got a preceptor kind of guiding them, and you got another 15 parents in the same school, and so they're kind of like competing against each other. Who can produce the most field trips? Who can produce the most bake sales? That kind of thing, so that they feel, who can make their schools the safest? Which teams? And so now you've got parents wanting to be involved with this, group of parents.
So almost like taking the PTAs and doing a, for lack of a PTA award night for, you know, because in some levels, the group that we want to go in and evaluate a school already exists. I mean, they've for a lot of ways they've been sidelined, and they're not full community representing. You know, they're solely parents, but and there are more stakes than just the parents in a school, but you know, the PTAs, if to your point of the sort of the sports model of, you know, who brings their school the furthest forward, you know, almost making a PTA competition.
Yeah.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
Well, there's actually a model that's already was launched this year. I think there's 350 students in it now. Nolan Williams, Champion Academy. He's been recruiting students this year, and he's going to add on to it next year. He's doing the evaluation in terms of how the students that are in this program are compared to what they were doing before and other students in the schools that they're coming from. I'm actually going to be meeting with some of the people from that effort on the 12th this week. I don't know how many people have heard of the Champion Academy. You know who Roland Williams is?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he's leading
Yeah.
this effort, and using his celebrity and his energy and his money to make this happen. So just kind of try and stay aware of that. I don't know. Like I said, I'm going to find out more on the 12th in terms of where they're at. But his plan is to expand that significantly beyond where he is right now.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here. I'm aware of the time. I'd really like to wrap it up in the next couple of minutes. And I'm not sure we fully addressed your proposal, but we got a good conversation started on it. I think maybe what I'd like to do is kind of write up sort of the main discussion points that we made around your proposal. We may circle back to it. We may need to do several rounds of this, but I would like to move to the next bucket for the next meeting. And so that could either be recruitment folks, you're up, or the neighborhood schools / transportation bucket, you guys could be up. But what I'd like you to do, whoever volunteers, whichever bucket it is, for you to also write a proposal that could be presented to the group that we could study and connect with the written policy as it is, so that we could have a similar discussion next time. So who would like to be up next time?
So recruitment and what?
There's the recruitment bucket, and then there's the third one, which we're calling neighborhood schools / transportation. Anybody
Me?
you care about?
You want to go?
Yeah, okay.
You guys, the neighborhood transportation folks? Okay, so could you write a no more than 2-page proposal that we could all kind of bite into next time in our comparison of the policy with your proposal?
I can
And get that to
expand
us.
on what I sent out
Yeah,
this time.
okay. Expand on that, and we'll read it and be prepared, and also have copies of it next time, and then continue this. And then the next meeting will be with the third bucket, and then maybe we'll circle back around and try to wrap this thing up within, not too many more meetings. Did you have a thought there? You have your pen up.
Oh, no,
You just.
Are these policy changes, are they going to be real, or are we going to be able to implement any of these?
So this is a task force, and we are going to present well thought out suggestions for the policy committee. And we can present in person to be as persuasive as we wish. I'm not guaranteeing this, but we want to critique and edit and revise and present and argue for improvement in the policy, and certainly in the true implementation next time around.
I have a fast thought on that one.
Yeah.
I think, I could be wrong, but my gut feeling, my intuition says that if we work with the city on drafting these recommendations, if we work with the city in partnership and collaboration as we move forward, and as we present to this policy committee, I think it's going to have much more traction in getting through
And
that.
of the
Yeah.
neighborhood transportation, is the marketing group ready to?
Well,
interested,
the
ready?
way I'm thinking about that is that they can both work.
Mhm.
But the marketing, I would think, ties into the neighborhood groups, and that's where I'd like to really get them, where the rubber hits the road on this.
Oh, so you're suggesting having both buckets next week?
Well, perhaps.
Both groups could have a document ready in advance, right? And then
Let's see how to count how.
springboard from it.
In case it's Tuesday, and they're prepared as well.
And then our group would say this is very preliminary because we want the city's input. So we can meet offline before the next meeting with the city on specific things. Then Liz, then we start having joint presentations with our task force and the city. Oh, that's really powerful.
Okay.
Yeah, and also we can,
Council.
whether we have one or two presentations, we can hand out the materials so they can review it and come up with questions.
And don't forget, these people that we're bringing in from the city will do reports to the city council and members. So they're going to be involved. They'll be excited here.
Okay.
So I think they'll really be happy that this is a major initiative.
I'm all for collaboration.
This initiative will make the earth move here. And
Yeah.
if we don't bring the city in,
There's no point.
We're dead in the water.
we're dead in the
Yeah,
water.
yeah,
Not
yeah.
only are we dead in the water, the district has done that over and over and over again. And the city is really wild, crazy, angry about
We're
it.
tired of it.
I agree. Yeah.
If there's one number, if we could get, I don't know if we could get the number of students or percentage of students that do not register for school, that are automatically placed
Okay.
in schools. If we could just have, I feel like that's a really powerful number.
Auto place.
Like, I would love to know what percentage of our students, their families don't register for them
Don't
school
do
at
the
all.
lottery.
So they
Okay.
just end up, like, I've talked with students who don't know what high school they're going to because their parents never filled out an application and they just get placed in a school. I'd love to know the percentage of
Okay, I can find
our
that out.
students because I think that could be really powerful for us to
I think
use.
there's a significant number.
I do.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I do.
On a similar note, because it would give us an idea of percentage of transiency of residents, what percentage of students change their address during the year?
Oh, okay.
You know, is that
How
is
big
that
is-
is
how
that
big is it?
5,
What's the
10?
mobility?
You know,
Right, okay.
you know, are we talking 120% churn by the time he figures this person moved 8 times? You know,
Okay.
what's the churn rate?
So is your question the percentage of mobility in terms of address or the percentage of mobility in terms of schools?
Well, no, in terms of address, because, I mean, the policy, whether it's followed or not, from the school district according to the website is quite clear unless you have, you know, after X date, unless you have very specific legal requirements, we are not transferring your school.
You may move, but you will stay in the same school.
You will stay in the same school. That's
Okay.
I mean, like I said, whether it's followed or not, I don't know. But the district website says basically, you know, unless you bring in a police letter saying that for protection reasons or whatever, you must move schools, we're not moving you. We'll just change your busing. But that gives us, however, an idea of over the course of a year, if the majority of students are now placed in a community school, what over the course of the year is the drift from that we're going to see on any given year? You know, as just sort of a general percentage.
Okay, I think, that's a very good point, and we know that that number is going to be very high because we're talking about people who are poor and who move for a variety of reasons, many times because they're living in decent housing. So they're seeking decent housing. So we
Right.
know that's going to be high.
Right.
And that would be a good argument for the transportation money that we should be seeing.
And for the city.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, I think we're done. We have our meeting next Tuesday, 4:30. I'll have to send out what room it is again, because they may have us here or they may have us elsewhere. These two groups who have presented put together no more than 2-page proposal. Send it to Mia. She'll get it out to everyone. We didn't review the minutes. Please look at those from last time. And you're going to invite a
I'm
city
gonna reach out to
person,
you.
that's a possibility.
See if-
Excuse me, the stuff that some of us talked about, is it okay if we type it up and bring it to you so you can put it in the bucket you said with the monitor, like when I was saying stuff, so that way we don't lose our thoughts and we can stay on point with stuff?
I think probably you captured what was said.
Okay.
So it should be in the minutes. And if you don't see it, look at the minutes. If you don't see it, you can add, you
I
can
just
say,
want
yeah, I
to
don't
make sure I
see
didn't
it.
want to lose it.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't want to not contribute anything to the table. I wanted to raise my hand, not that I was scared to. I wanted to raise my hand to. I just don't want to overwhelm myself. I got so much going on.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Look forward to your proposals, and I'll see you next month.
Thank you.